Starting next month, you're going to owe us $650 in rent." For a moment, I honestly thought Jennifer was joking. I looked up from my coffee and waited for the smile. It never came. My daughter-in-law stood there at the kitchen counter in a charcoal grey sweater, holding a neatly printed rental agreement in one hand and a pen in the other. Behind her, the morning sun poured through the bay windows of the house, turning the hardwood floors soft and golden. My son Michael sat maybe 10 feet away at the kitchen table. He stared into his cereal bowl like the answers to every question in his life were sitting in that milk. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't say a single word. Real quick. "Where are you tuning in from and what's the time there right now? Drop it below." "Now, let's pick this back up." Jennifer slid the papers across the granite countertop. "I've already calculated everything," she said in that matter-of-fact voice she used when she was making a decision that wasn't really open for discussion. $650 covers your room, utilities, internet, and shared household expenses." I blinked at her. "My room? Well," she gave a small shrug. "You're living here. We all have responsibilities." I slowly picked up the papers with both hands. She had actually drafted a month-to-month rental agreement. There was a place for my signature, a due date, a late fee, even a clause stating I could be asked to leave with 30 days' notice if I failed to pay. I looked at Michael. He finally raised his eyes to meet mine, but barely. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think it's fair." That word echoed in my head. Jennifer folded her arms across her chest. "If we're being honest," she continued, "most people your age pay something when they live with family." I looked around that kitchen slowly. The Viking appliances that weren't really Viking but looked expensive. The marble countertops she'd insisted on during the renovation. The custom cabinets with the soft, close hinges. The sweeping view of the neighborhood stretching out through those windows. Everything about this place screamed success. Everything screamed money. But neither of them knew the truth. Neither of them knew what I'd done 9 months earlier. I had quietly purchased this entire house. Every single brick, every board, every square foot of it. The deed was in my name. Legally, what they were doing right now wasn't charging their father-in-law rent. They were trying to charge their landlord. My name is Richard Paulson. I'm 65 years old, a widower and a retired commercial carpenter. For 40 years I built things in Nebraska. Highway projects, municipal buildings, school renovations, hospital wings. I built new wings onto the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I worked on the highways running east and west out of Omaha, concrete, steel, schedules. That's what I understood my entire life. People, I thought I understood those too. Apparently I was wrong. My wife Catherine, she used to say something that drove me a little crazy when we were younger. "Tom," she'd laugh at me, "houses are easy. Families are the hard part." I always rolled my eyes at that. Turns out she'd been right all along. Catherine passed away 4 years ago after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. The doctors warned us. The hospice nurses got us ready. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares a husband for the silence that follows 48 years of marriage. Every room in our old house in West Omaha whispered her name. Her gardening gloves hung beside the garage door. Her favorite coffee mug stayed in the cabinet. The indentation on her side of the mattress refused to disappear no matter how many times I washed the sheets. After a year of living alone, I finally sold that house. Not because I wanted to, but because every single day inside those walls hurt a little more than the day before. Michael convinced me that moving closer would help. "You'll be around the grandkids," he told me. "You won't be lonely anymore." Jennifer agreed enthusiastically. "We'd absolutely love having you nearby." Those words sounded sincere back then. They even helped me find a small apartment only 12 minutes away. For the first year, life was peaceful. I'd stop by the school to pick up my grandkids, Thomas and Sophie. I'd take them for ice cream, help with homework, teach Thomas how to build bird feeders in my garage. Emily thanked me often. Michael hugged me every Sunday. If someone had told me back then that one day they'd hand me a rental agreement, I would have laughed. Things began changing slowly. So slowly you could almost miss it if you weren't paying attention. Jennifer became obsessed with appearances. New luxury SUV, designer handbags, a backyard renovation that cost more than some houses. Then came the kitchen remodel, even though the old one was perfectly fine. Expensive vacations, private schools, country club memberships. Michael always looked exhausted. He started working weekends, then evenings. Then it was like his job just swallowed his entire life. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. I figured every marriage has its seasons. But one afternoon, by pure accident, everything changed. I was having lunch with my old attorney, David Hartley. We'd known each other for 31 years. He handled all the paperwork whenever I bought commercial property during my construction days. Halfway through lunch, he frowned at his tablet. "That's strange," he said to himself. "What is?" I looked at him. "Your son's address. What about it?" The lender handling that mortgage just filed preliminary foreclosure paperwork. I nearly dropped my fork. What? David turned the tablet toward me. There it was. The address. Michael's house. This house. The mortgage was seriously delinquent. Months behind. I couldn't believe it. Michael had never mentioned financial trouble to me. Not once. That night I drove home wondering what had happened. The next morning I asked Michael if everything was okay. He smiled without hesitation. Everything's great, Dad. He lied to me like it was nothing. A week later I quietly met with David again. He explained the options. The bank hadn't completed the foreclosure yet. Michael still had time, but unless someone paid the outstanding balance or purchased the property outright, they'd lose everything. The kids would lose their home. That thought stayed with me all day and all night. Not Michael, not Jennifer, the kids. Thomas had learned to ride his bike in that driveway. Sophie measured her height against the pantry door every single birthday. They didn't deserve to watch strangers move into their house, so I made a decision that I never told anyone about. Through an LLC that David helped me establish years ago for investment properties, I negotiated directly with the lender. The transaction remained completely confidential. The mortgage disappeared. Ownership transferred to me. But Michael and Jennifer kept making what they believed were mortgage payments. Those payments actually became rent payments under an occupancy arrangement handled through escrow until new agreements could be made. David suggested I tell them immediately. I refused. They're already embarrassed enough, I said. They don't need to know I bailed them out. I truly believed I'd tell them someday. Just not yet. Then life moved on, or so I thought. Over the following months, Jennifer changed even more. She started referring to things as my house. She criticized where I parked my truck. She complained if I left tools in the garage after fixing something. Once she actually told me not to rearrange the furniture because it would hurt the home's resale value. I remember thinking that was an odd thing to say. Now I understood. She believed she owned every inch of this place. She even joked to a neighbor last month. We'll probably sell this place in a few years and upgrade. Upgrade. The irony almost made me smile. This morning, that joke ended. Jennifer tapped the rental agreement with one manicured fingernail. So she looked directly at me. Have you made a decision? Michael's shoulders tensed. I reached into my jacket. But instead of removing a checkbook, I pulled out the rental agreement, still unsigned. I've read it several times, I told her. Jennifer smiled, and I have one question. Sure, she said. If I refuse, her smile faded. What happens? She answered without hesitation. Then we'll probably need you to find somewhere else to live. The room became very quiet. Even the grandchildren sensed something was wrong. I slowly turned toward my son. He looked down at his plate again. No words, no defense, no apology, just silence. I folded the agreement neatly and slipped it back into my pocket. I'll think about it a little longer, I told her. Jennifer leaned back confidently. That's probably best. She believed she had all the leverage. She believed I had nowhere else to go. She believed the house belonged to her family. As I drove home beneath the Nebraska sky, I reached for my phone. There was only one person I needed to call. David answered on the second ring. Everything all right, Tom? I looked in the rearview mirror. No, I spoke calmly, but I think it's time we stop waiting. There was a brief silence. Then David asked the question he'd been expecting for months. You want me to prepare the paperwork? I kept driving. Yes, this week. David Hartley had been my attorney for 31 years. He'd seen me negotiate million-dollar construction contracts without raising my voice. He'd watched me settle disputes that should have ended in lawsuits with nothing more than a handshake. He also knew something most people didn't. When I stopped speaking, I had already made my decision. That Friday morning, I walked into his office carrying nothing but a worn leather folder and a photograph of Catherine tucked inside my wallet. David looked up from his desk. You look better. I slept, made peace with my decision. I nodded once. I have. He motioned toward the chair across from him. Let's do this the right way. The conference room overlooked the Omaha skyline. Years ago, I would have admired the view. Today, I barely noticed it. David opened a thick file. The property transfer was recorded 8 months ago. He slid copies toward me. The LLC legally purchased the home from the lender after the default. I quietly flipped through the documents. Every signature, every notarized page, every recording number from Douglas County. Perfectly legal, perfectly clean. The mortgage is paid in full, David said. The title held solely by Bennett Property Holdings. I smiled faintly. My least creative company name. David chuckled. You never cared about clever names. I cared about solid foundations. He leaned back.
So, you want to transfer ownership into your personal name?
I nodded. Yes. You understand they'll be able to see it immediately once they're served? I know, and once we begin eviction proceedings, there won't be any going back. He waited. I signed the transfer documents without hesitation. There, I said. No more hiding behind an LLC. David gathered the paperwork. I'll have everything recorded Monday morning. Before I left, he asked something unexpected. Tom, what are you doing this because you're angry? I thought about that question for a long moment. No, I said finally. Then why? I looked out the window. Because they already decided I don't belong. If I keep pretending nothing happened, I'm agreeing with them. David slowly nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. Driving home, I found myself thinking about Catherine again. Not the last months, the happy years. She had always been the emotional one. I was the practical one. Whenever Michael got into trouble as a teenager, I'd immediately start looking for solutions. Catherine would ask questions first. Why did he make that choice? What was he feeling? I used to tease her. You'd make a terrible contractor. She'd laugh. And you'd make a terrible therapist. We balanced each other. Now I had to figure out both jobs alone. Saturday morning, Thomas called. Grandpa, hey buddy, can you still come to my baseball game? I smiled despite everything. I wouldn't miss it. The field sat only 15 minutes away. Michael coached first base. Jennifer sat with the other parents beneath a shade canopy. When I arrived, Thomas spotted me immediately. Grandpa. He ran across the grass before anyone could stop him. He wrapped both arms around my waist. You came. Of course I did, you always do. His words hit harder than he realized. Yes, I always had and I always would. For him, for Sophie. Children should never pay for adult mistakes. After the game, Thomas proudly carried his helmet toward the parking lot. Jennifer intercepted us. We're going straight home. Thomas looked disappointed. But Grandpa always gets ice cream with us. Jennifer smiled politely. Not today. I looked at Thomas. It's okay, buddy. We'll go another time. He nodded sadly. As they walked away, Sophie looked back through the rear window of the SUV. She pressed her tiny hand against the glass. I raised mine. The SUV disappeared around the corner. That image stayed with me all afternoon. Monday morning, David called. It's done. The deed has been recorded. Good. I've also prepared the eviction notices. I took a deep breath. Let's review them. He emailed everything while we spoke. Nebraska law required proper notice, specific timelines, formal service, no shortcuts. I insisted everything be done exactly by the book. No surprises, no legal tricks, no humiliation. Just facts. Later that afternoon, another thought occurred to me. I called David again. One more thing. What's that? I don't want the kids caught in the middle. What do you have in mind? I want you to find a furnished rental nearby. For Michael? No, for the grandchildren. He laughed softly. You know that's impossible. I know, I smiled, so find one big enough for all four of them. He understood immediately. You'll pay the first few months. As many as necessary. He was quiet for a moment. Tom, they don't deserve this. I know. No matter how badly their parents behaved, I know. That Tuesday evening I drove past the house, not because I wanted to spy, but because I wanted one last memory before everything changed. The lights glowed warmly. Someone had hung flower baskets on the front porch. Michael was washing his truck. Jennifer laughed with a neighbor across the driveway. From the outside, they looked like the perfect American family. No one walking past would ever imagine the marriage under pressure, the unpaid mortgage that had nearly destroyed them, or the father sitting quietly inside his pickup, trying to save what little remained of his family. The next afternoon, Jennifer called. Hi, Tom. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. Hello, we're repainting the upstairs guest room. Oh, we've decided to turn it into a home office. I smiled slightly. Have you? Yeah, we don't really need a guest room anymore. The words were subtle, but I understood them perfectly. There wasn't going to be space for me. Not emotionally, not physically. I simply answered. I hope it turns out nicely. She seemed almost disappointed that I didn't argue. That evening, I opened the old cedar chest Catherine had kept at the foot of our bed. Inside were birthday cards, vacation photos, our wedding album. Near the bottom lay a small white envelope with my name written across it in her handwriting. I'd forgotten it was there. Inside was a note she'd written years earlier during one of our anniversary trips. It read, Tom, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Promise me something. If the day ever comes when someone mistakes your kindness for weakness, don't let them. Loving people doesn't mean letting them erase your dignity. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My eyes blurred. I could almost hear her voice. She wasn't telling me to seek revenge. She was reminding me that kindness without self-respect eventually becomes permission. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. Thursday morning, David arrived at my apartment carrying a slim leather briefcase. He laid 3 sealed envelopes on my dining table, one for Michael, one for Jennifer, and one for the official process server. I stared at them, such ordinary-looking envelopes. Amazing how a family's future could fit inside a few sheets of paper. David closed his briefcase. Once these are delivered, I know. He studied my face, last chance to stop. I looked toward the window where the Nebraska sun was beginning to rise. No. I rested one hand on the envelopes. I've spent my whole life building homes. Then I quietly added, It's time to remind my own family what a home actually means. Tomorrow morning they would find out exactly who owned theirs. The process server delivered the envelopes at exactly 9:14 Friday morning. I wasn't there. I didn't want to witness the moment. Some things are better left unseen. Instead, I sat on a bench outside Zorinsky Lake Park with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. At 9:26, my phone rang. Michael. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad. His breathing was heavy. What is this? I assume you opened the envelope. Eviction papers. His voice cracked. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. He lowered his voice. Can you come over? I'll be there in 30 minutes. The driveway was already crowded when I arrived. Michael stood outside pacing. Jennifer was talking loudly into her phone. The process server had long since left. Even from across the yard I could hear her. This is harassment. There's no way. We own this house. She stopped when she saw my truck. Her face turned bright red. She marched toward me, waving the papers. What kind of sick joke is this? It isn't a joke. She thrust the documents into my chest. You think you can scare us? No. I'm simply informing you. Informing us of what? That the house belongs to me. For a second she actually laughed. A loud, sarcastic laugh. Michael didn't. He looked terrified. Jennifer shook her head. This is ridiculous. Our names are on the mortgage. Were, I answered calmly. What do you mean were? She frowned. I don't know what game you're playing. I'm not playing one. Michael finally spoke. Dad. His voice barely carried. Please come inside. The kitchen looked exactly the way it had the morning she handed me the rental agreement. Same granite island, same polished floors, same expensive coffee machine, humming quietly in the corner. Funny how quickly a room can feel completely different. Jennifer remained standing. Michael pulled out a chair for me. I sat. Neither of them did. Finally, Jennifer slapped the eviction notice onto the countertop. Explain this. I folded my hands. 9 months ago your mortgage fell into default. She immediately interrupted. That's impossible. It isn't. Michael looked at her. You told me we'd caught up. Jennifer ignored him. She stared at me instead. You don't know anything about our finances. I know more than you think. Michael slowly turned pale. What did you do? I looked at my son. I saved your house. Silence, complete silence. Jennifer blinked twice. What does that even mean? It means the bank was preparing for foreclosure. Michael whispered. You knew. I found out by accident. His shoulders slumped. You should have told us. I asked if everything was okay. You told me everything was fine. He couldn't answer because he remembered. He remembered lying. Jennifer folded her arms. Even if that's true, it has nothing to do with ownership. It has everything to do with ownership. She laughed again. No, the deed says otherwise. It does. Then show me. I reached into my leather briefcase. David had organized everything neatly. Property records, recorded deed, purchase agreement, county filings. I placed them on the island one page at a time. Jennifer barely glanced at them. They're fake. They're public records. Michael slowly picked up the first page. His hands began trembling. Dad. He turned another page, then another. His breathing grew faster. No. He looked toward Jennifer. Our mortgage. She grabbed our papers. What am I looking at? The transfer? No. The recorded deed? No. The lender sold the property? No. She slammed the papers onto the counter. This isn't legal. At that exact moment, the front doorbell rang. David Collins walked inside carrying another folder. Jennifer spun toward him. Who are you? My name is David Hartley. I'm Mr. Paulson's attorney. Her expression changed instantly. David remained professional, polite, calm. I understand this is upsetting. Upsetting. Jennifer nearly shouted. He's trying to steal our house. David didn't react. Mrs. Michael, your lender initiated foreclosure proceedings after prolonged default. You entered into negotiations that unfortunately did not resolve the debt. So the lender exercised its legal rights. Michael interrupted. We would have caught up. David looked directly at him. The bank didn't believe that. No one spoke. David continued. My client purchased the property before foreclosure was completed. The transaction fully satisfied the outstanding loan. Jennifer stared. So, we've been paying? David nodded once. Occupancy payments? She looked completely lost. No, that can't be right. I have every recorded document. She looked toward Michael. Say something. Michael didn't. Instead, he slowly sat down. His face had become almost grey. Then came the question I'd been expecting. Dad, why didn't you tell us? I looked at him for several seconds before answering. Because I wanted to protect your children. He frowned, and because, I paused. I wanted to believe you'd eventually tell me the truth. His eyes filled with tears. I was ashamed. I know. Jennifer stepped forward again. You had no right. That was the first time my voice became firm. No, I had every right. I bought the house. I paid every cent. I never asked for thank you. I never asked for repayment. I simply hoped you'd treat me like family. She stared at me, then she said something I'll never forget. You manipulated us. I slowly shook my head. No, I gave you 9 months. 9 months to tell me. 9 months to ask for help. 9 months to treat me with respect. I looked directly at the rental agreement, still lying in the kitchen drawer. Instead, you handed your own father-in-law a lease. Michael suddenly buried his face in his hands. Oh, God, his shoulders shook. I can't believe this. I wanted to comfort him. Part of me still saw the little boy holding that plastic baseball trophy, but another part remembered every moment he'd stayed silent, every time he'd looked away, every opportunity he'd had to speak. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a husband, a father, a grown man responsible for his own choices. Jennifer's anger slowly gave way to panic. What happens now? David answered before I could. The notice provides the timeline required under Nebraska law. If you vacate voluntarily, the process remains straightforward. If you refuse, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Everyone understood. Jennifer looked around the kitchen at the marble counters, the custom cabinets, the family photographs, everything she'd believed belonged to her. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. I stood. I'm not throwing you onto the street. Both of them looked up. I've already arranged temporary housing. Jennifer frowned. You did? For the grandchildren. And for both of you. Michael stared in disbelief. You still. I promised your mother I'd always take care of family. I picked up my hat. But taking care of family doesn't mean accepting disrespect. I walked toward the front door. Just before leaving, I turned back one final time. I didn't come here to win a house. I came here hoping not to lose my son. The silence behind me said everything. The moving boxes appeared 3 days later, not because they wanted to leave, but because reality has a way of arriving whether we're ready for it or not. I drove by the house that Monday morning, on my way to the hardware store. A rental truck sat in the driveway. Michael was carrying boxes from the garage. Jennifer stood near the front door, barking instructions into her phone. For just a moment I considered stopping. Instead, I kept driving. They deserved the privacy I wish they'd once given me. People often imagine revenge as shouting, slamming doors, public humiliation. The truth is, real consequences are usually very quiet. There were no police cars, no neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, no dramatic arguments, just a family slowly packing up the life they'd built. That afternoon, David called. They've accepted the temporary rental. I nodded. Good. They'll be moving in tomorrow. The children? They've already seen the new place. I smiled. Did they like it? They love the backyard. I felt something inside me loosen. The furnished home I'd rented for them wasn't extravagant. Just a comfortable 4-bedroom house 15 minutes away. Same school district, same baseball league, same dance studio. I had insisted on all of it. Children lose enough during adult conflicts. They didn't need to lose their friends too. Tuesday evening my phone buzzed. It was Thomas, Grandpa. Hi buddy. We're moving. I know. There was a long pause. Did we do something bad? That question nearly broke me. No, you and Sophie didn't do anything wrong, then why can't we stay? I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big mistakes. Sometimes. Another silence. Finally he asked, are you still my grandpa? I closed my eyes. Always, even if we live somewhere else, I'll be your grandpa wherever you live. His voice brightened. Can we still build the treehouse this summer? I laughed softly through the lump in my throat. You better believe it. Cool. Then just before hanging up, he quietly said, I love you. I love you too, buddy. When the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment for several minutes. No courtroom victory could ever mean more than hearing those 4 words. The following Friday, Michael asked if we could meet. Not at the house, not at his rental, at a small coffee shop halfway between us called The Grind. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. Unshaven, older than his 39 years. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup but never drank it. I'm sorry. I didn't answer, he continued. I should have told you about the mortgage. Yes, I was embarrassed, I know. I kept thinking I'd fix it before anyone found out. I nodded. That's what pride does. He looked down. I wasn't trying to hurt you. No, you were trying to avoid discomfort. He sighed deeply. I guess that's worse. It can be. We sat quietly for a while. Finally, he looked at me. Jennifer still thinks you planned all this. I didn't. I know. He rubbed his forehead. I do now. Then he surprised me. I found the notices from the bank. You did? They'd been arriving for months. He swallowed hard. Jennifer hid some of them. I frowned. You didn't know. No, I knew we were behind. I didn't know how bad it had become. I believed him. Not because he was my son, but because I could see the shame on his face. It wasn't the shame of getting caught. It was the shame of finally seeing the truth. A week later, Jennifer called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hello. Her voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. I need to ask you something. I'm listening. Why? I smiled faintly. Why? What? Why would you pay for our rental? You could have just thrown us out. I leaned back in my chair. I could have. So why didn't you? I thought about Catherine, about the note she left me, about 48 years of marriage built on compassion instead of scorekeeping. Because my disagreement is with you, not with Thomas, not with Sophie. She didn't speak. After several seconds, I added, and despite everything, you're still the mother of my grandchildren. Her breathing caught. I don't deserve that kindness. No, you don't. But kindness isn't always earned. Sometimes it's chosen. She quietly thanked me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was the first honest conversation we'd had in months. Over the next several weeks, I slowly returned to the house. My house. It felt strangely empty. The echoes surprised me most. A home filled with children always sounds alive. Without them, every room seemed too large, too quiet. I wandered through each space. The upstairs hallway still had pencil marks where Thomas and Sophie had measured their height. Jennifer had painted over most of them during the remodel, but one remained, tiny, almost hidden behind a doorframe. Thomas, age 7, I smiled. Some memories refused to disappear. Neighbors gradually learned the truth, not from me, from public records. A few stopped by. I had no idea. You saved them. I tried. They charged you rent. I simply nodded. Most shook their heads. One older gentleman named Jim laughed. I would have thrown them out the same day. I smiled politely. Maybe, but anger makes fast decisions. Age had taught me to make slower ones. About a month after the move, David invited me to lunch. You know, he said, I practiced law for almost 40 years. I've seen families destroy each other over far less. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone, I know. That's why I wanted lunch. He stirred his iced tea. You realize you could have sued them. I wasn't interested. You could have demanded back rent. I laughed. They already tried that. David grinned. I suppose they did. Then he became serious. You're handling this better than most people would. I looked out the restaurant window. When Catherine died, I learned something. Life's too short to spend chasing revenge. I only wanted my dignity back. David raised his glass. Mission accomplished. The house slowly came back to life. Not because new furniture arrived, but because peace returned. For the first time in months, I could drink my morning coffee without feeling like an unwanted guest. No one criticized where I parked. No one complained about my tools. No one made me feel like I needed permission to exist. That peace was worth far more than $895,000. Still, every evening when I looked at the empty chairs around the dining table, I couldn't help wishing the price of peace hadn't been so high. Almost 6 months passed before Michael knocked on my front door. I knew it was him before I opened it. Parents recognize the rhythm of their children's footsteps, even when those children are middle-aged. When I pulled the door open, he stood there wearing jeans and an old Nebraska Cornhuskers sweatshirt and the same uneasy expression he'd worn as a teenager whenever he knew he'd made a mistake. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he held up a cardboard box. I found these while unpacking. I looked inside. Catherine's old recipe book, several framed family photographs, a Christmas ornament Thomas had made in 2nd grade, and my favorite hammer, the one my father had given me when I was 21. I thought I'd lost this. Michael smiled sadly. It was in the garage. He hesitated. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Of course, the apartment wasn't large, but it was comfortable. A bookshelf lined one wall. Catherine's favorite rocking chair sat beside the window. Fresh coffee filled the room. Michael looked around quietly. I've never actually seen your place. No, I guess you never asked. There it was again. Another small truth. Not cruel, just painfully honest. He hadn't asked. Not because he didn't love me, but because somewhere along the way, he'd assumed I'd always be there. Always fine. Always waiting. We sat at the kitchen table for several minutes. We talked about ordinary things. The Cornhuskers football season, baseball, the grandkids' school. Eventually, Michael took a long breath. I started seeing a counselor. I looked up. Good. I thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle life. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I was one of those people. No. I shook my head gently. Therapy is for people willing to face life. He nodded. The counselor asked me something during our second session. What? He asked when I stopped making my own decisions. Michael stared into his coffee. I couldn't answer. He rubbed his hands together. I kept blaming Jennifer. He looked at me. But the truth is, I let it happen. I avoided every hard conversation with her, with you, with myself. I simply listened. Sometimes people don't need advice. They need someone willing to hear the truth they've finally found. A few weeks later, Thomas invited me to his baseball championship. This time, both Michael and Jennifer greeted me at the entrance. Jennifer looked different, not because of her clothes, but because of her expression. The confidence that had once bordered on arrogance had softened into humility. After the game, she walked over while Thomas celebrated with his teammates. I owe you an apology. You don't have to. Yes, she interrupted herself. I really do. She folded her hands nervously. I spent years thinking success meant owning nicer things. She glanced toward the parking lot, the bigger house, the better neighborhood, the expensive vacations. I thought those things proved we'd made it. She looked back at me. I forgot that character matters more than appearances. I remained quiet, she continued. I also forgot that gratitude isn't something you feel, it's something you practice. There was no dramatic crying, no theatrical speech, just simple honesty. Sometimes that's the hardest kind. I'm sorry for treating you like you were a burden. I'm sorry for making you feel unwelcome, and she swallowed. I'm sorry I tried to charge you rent. For the first time in months, I smiled without sadness. Thank you. Those 2 words were enough. Forgiveness doesn't always begin with a hug. Sometimes it begins with someone finally telling the truth. The relationship didn't magically return to what it had once been. Life doesn't work that way. Trust once broken grows back slowly, like a tree after a storm. New branches appear, but the scars remain. Michael began calling every Sunday again. Not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. Sometimes we'd have breakfast together. Sometimes we'd work on little woodworking projects in my garage. Sometimes we'd simply sit on the porch drinking coffee without saying much at all. Oddly enough, the silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. One Saturday morning, Thomas and Sophie came over to help me build the treehouse I'd promised. As we measured boards and hammered nails, Thomas asked, "Grandpa?" "Yeah, buddy. Are you rich?" I laughed. "Why would you ask that?" "Mom says you bought a really expensive house." I smiled. "I've been fortunate," he thought for a moment. "Is that why you're happy?" Children ask remarkable questions. I set my hammer down. "No, what makes you happy?" I pointed toward him. "You," he grinned, "and your sister, and watching you learn how to build things." He looked at the half-finished treehouse. "So, this is better than a mansion?" I nodded. "Much better." He seemed satisfied with that answer. Children usually are. Adults tend to complicate happiness. Several months later, I made one final decision. I invited Michael and Jennifer to David's office. The moment David entered with a folder, they exchanged nervous glances. Jennifer looked at me. "We're not getting evicted again, are we?" I laughed. "No." David placed several documents on the table. I asked Mr. Hartley to update my estate plan. Michael immediately looked uncomfortable. "Dad, you don't have to leave us anything." "I know." David opened the folder. "The house will remain in Mr. Paulson's trust." Michael nodded. "That makes sense." But David continued. "There is now a condition." Jennifer frowned. "A condition?" I answered before David could. "If anything ever happens to me, the house won't immediately belong to either of you." Michael looked confused. "Then who?" I smiled. "A trust for Thomas and Sophie." Their eyes widened. "The home can't be sold until they're adults. It can't be borrowed against. It can't be used to finance lifestyles. It will always remain a place they can come home to." Michael slowly smiled. "You really thought this through. I've had plenty of time." Jennifer quietly reached across the table. "Not for the paperwork, but for my hand, thank you." This time I believed her. As I grow older, I've realized something I wish I'd understood decades ago. A house isn't measured by its square footage. It isn't measured by granite countertops, market value, or curb appeal. A real home is measured by whether people inside feel safe, respected, welcomed, loved. I lost that feeling for a while. Not because someone took it from me, but because I forgot that protecting my peace is just as important as protecting the people I love. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop loving your family. Sometimes, it's the only thing that gives your family a chance to become better. If Catherine were sitting beside me today, I think she'd smile that quiet smile I miss every morning. Then she'd probably remind me of something she always believed. Kindness should open the door, but dignity should decide who stays. I think she was right, and if this story reminded you that love should never require you to surrender your self-respect, I hope you'll carry that thought with you long after today. If you've ever faced a difficult family situation, or learned that forgiveness and boundaries can exist together, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, you're always welcome to join us again by subscribing to Dad Honor Stories for more. Until next time, take care of the people you love, including yourself.